Okay, good morning, everyone. I don't know what oh. I apologize for that. We had some issue with our screen sharing. Dr. Brumley, are you on?
Yes, I'm online. Thank you.
Okay, hi, welcome. So I just want to welcome everyone to this session for the talking about K-12 education with Superintendent Dr. Cade Brumley. And we asked him to join our conference and talk about his vision for students with disabilities. Dr. Brumley is newly appointed as the superintendent just last month. So welcome, Dr. Brumley. He has spent his whole life in public education, from teacher, coach, assistant principal, principal, district leader, and superintendent. And so just prior to coming to become the superintendent of the Department of Education, he was the superintendent of Jefferson Parish School System, which is the largest parish school system in our state. And so he certainly has come into this position with in a time that we've never faced before. And I appreciate him taking the time to come and just talk to us about students with disabilities. I know he'll share his experiences and, as I said, his vision for our students as we move forward. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Brumley.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the call today, and thank you for letting me be a part of the conversation. As you mentioned, I have spent my entire life in education in the state of Louisiana, working to hopefully provide greater opportunities for every child, and at the same time, very interested in making sure that every child ended up with greater outcomes, whatever those outcomes might need to be for that individual child. So as a school principal, I was interested in ensuring that every child got the resources and support that they would need to be successful. But my first real engagement at a broader scale came when I served as assistant superintendent in DeSoto Parish schools in North Louisiana. And when I entered that role, that system was under a corrective action order because some of the expectations for students with exceptionalities had not, the system was not where it needed to be, and not because of a lack of desire. It was more because of a lack of organized structures and emphasis on the need to support every child. And so we worked to rethink what services might look like in that system. And thankfully, we were able to make significant changes. We were able to be removed from that order. And I think looking at academic results for students with disabilities, now, I believe that system now ranks in the 90th percentile across the state of Louisiana. I think that is a result of employees there that are doing good work, but also many of the structures that we put in place, now almost a decade ago. While serving as superintendent in DeSoto Parish, we moved from 49th in the state of all systems, which there were about 70 systems at the time, to number 9. And I was most proud of several key statistics during that time, one of which being we moved into the top 10 for academic outcomes for our special education population. And so I was really thankful that we were able to get those results. After serving in DeSoto as assistant superintendent for a few years and then superintendent for 6 years, I saw an opportunity in Jefferson Parish to really make an impact with a larger amount of students. Jefferson Parish serves now almost 51,000 kids, and so stepped into that role and really committed to trying to illuminate outcomes for all students, including students with disabilities, and engaging parents and advocacy groups together, and trying to do a couple of important things in that space. One, knocking down walls and barriers that outside providers faced as they tried to gain entry into seeing students in the school system. And so we were one of the first systems to put out policy on ensuring that external providers, and certainly this group understands the various providers, had access to students in the school building where they would be. And so that was important for us. We did that. And the next thing that we were able to do that actually prompted in some ways state legislation is set up a superintendent's advisory council for special education. And in doing that, we brought to the table teachers, principals, parents, and advocates all together to look at important policy decisions and important practices that were taking place in our school system, and holding each other accountable and trying to just figure out together how we could do better for all of our students. And that was really a positive experience as well. I want to continue to illuminate results, whatever those might be, for all students. Certainly follow federal some of the federal guidelines that has helped to raise important issues within this community, and also make sure that people have a seat at the table. I've shared a number of times that Louisiana is not the largest state in the union, but we have a big table, and to all extents possible, I want to make sure that we have people there who can offer feedback and suggestions and ideas on how we might get better together. So I'm really looking forward to the feedback component of this conversation, the question and answer period. And just as an upfront, we are developing strategy right now, but I'm really focused right now on hearing what people have to say, looking for patterns in the things that are being said, so that we can come out with strategy and that would ultimately, I guess, lead policy decisions. So on this call, if the idea is that I'm going to be pinned down to say we're going to do this or that, or I believe this or that, that's just not going to happen, because what I'm really focused on deliberately is trying to hear and listen to the things that are most important across all aspects of the educational community. So thanks for letting me open up, and I look forward to that Q&A as we move forward.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley. So right now what we'll do, if people have questions, they can ask questions through the chat, or they can ask questions through our YouTube channel, which is being monitored. If you cannot get through on the YouTube channel to make the chat, to do the comments on the YouTube channel, you can log in to the link that you received in Zoom. We're just asking not everyone to log in to Zoom so we don't exceed the capacity within the Zoom meeting. So if we have any questions, we'll have our staff monitoring the chat, or you can raise your hand if you're within Zoom, or type your questions within our YouTube. So give everyone a moment to do that. Okay, so we have a couple questions in the chat. So, Dr. Brumley, what are your strengths?
So Bambi, just so you'll know, I just typed into the chat feature 5 key questions that I've been trying to ask most groups when we've had a
Okay.
similar call. These questions would, you know, the answers rather to these questions would be really helpful for me as we think through how to move forward. And those are, when we think about education in Louisiana, and whenever we think about the interest of this particular group, like what are the strengths that you see in our state? What are our challenges or areas where we can improve? What are some things maybe that we should start doing? What are some things we should stop doing? And what is possible for education in our state?
So, so those are the questions that you would like to answer, or you would like for us to give you that feedback?
No, I would love to get some feedback on those questions. And
Okay.
certainly any question I'd love to hear, and any feedback I'd love to hear. But those are 5 of the questions I've basically asked all groups to try and help frame some feedback for me.
Okay, so one of the issues that I know I hear often is that people being able to get the resources they need at the State Department of Education in regards to special education. And so how can, what is going to be done to kind of build up that capacity? Probably about a decade ago, they had a pretty robust capacity within the Department of Education to get resources. And from people who are basically experts in whatever area they were in. And so I know that I've heard that from, educators and service providers within the school system, as well as parents. And so I hope that that's something that you will look at and kind of bringing that back within the State Department.
So whenever you say trouble or a struggle to get resources, could you tell me more specifically what that means?
So what I've heard, and I actually have,
I'm taking notes. So
okay. So in the past, people have, about, like I said, about 10 years or so and further in the past, there were people at the Department of Education who had expertise in different fields, specifically areas of low incidence, disabilities, or just you call and ask someone about specific disability specific issues or different type of service options. And that has not been the case over the past several years. And so, for instance, I can tell I'm a former teacher, and also I have a son who just graduated from high school who has autism. So I can remember when he was young that I could call someone at the Department of Education if the district, at the school district and I weren't able to come to, an agreement on what he needed. And people were, and there was someone or multiple people at the Department of Education who had expertise from the experience, as you have the experience in the classroom and in the school setting, and could provide that assistance to both the parent and the educators and the school systems on how to best meet those needs. And so there was just a larger capacity within the State Department to access that. Just even that knowledge base was important to have.
So whenever you say that, are you referring to, and I'm taking notes and I'm trying to learn so I know exactly what you're saying. So are you referring to the amount of staff not being adequate? Or are you talking more specifically about what the staff actually know and expertise levels for them to be able to support?
I think it's both. I think that department has been, there's much fewer people and also maybe less experience, like actually hands-on experience in schools and working with that population.
Thank you for that.
And we have some questions in the, oh, you want, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I'm good, I'm just listening.
Okay. So we have a few questions in the chat. So how are your feelings about returning to monitoring districts for compliance? and we need to start doing real monitoring again.
So it would be great if, you know, I don't know how you're handling communication with the attendees, but it would be great if you could elaborate on specifically, you know, what you think is meant by that comment or question.
So monitoring, I could tell you what I know, and maybe the person can chat. So monitoring,
And let me just, as before you, sorry to cut you off, but like, having served as a district superintendent for 8 years, I know a lot about the relationships between district and the state. So I understand the terms and terminology and the processes. I just really want to know what the individual asking the question really wants, or what the feedback they're really trying to give. So.
Okay. So I'll kind of elaborate as I know it, and maybe the person can elaborate some more. So in the past, as I remember many years ago, there were people from the State Department, and I can remember it was a group of people that are part of this monitoring team that would go in and basically, you know, just kind of do monitoring by looking at a few, you know, IEPs, or going into specific schools and looking at some things as it relates to what compliance of IDEA. I can remember that team holding stakeholder meetings, you know, like having parents meetings in the evening in that district, or with teachers, and talking about their experience, and then being able to provide, you know, some feedback and direction. Now I think the process has been, the monitoring is basically self-monitoring of the district. And so it really leaves sometimes holes in districts' compliance with the IDEA.
Okay.
And then we have another comment. It's so hard to navigate this chat. Another person says, what education assistance and programs are available for students seeking the available to disabled students seeking higher education, to include disabled veterans? So I think that's a higher education, but maybe we could talk about, I think it's an important point about like transitional services for students with disabilities. And if you can elaborate on what your experience is, or what your thoughts are on that, kids with disabilities transitioning out of high school.
Yeah. So first of all, I just think it's important that there be a plan in place, you know, and making sure that people realize that this is an expectation of something that must be done, not just, oh, this is a good idea. And then actually having a strategy on how you're accomplishing that. So transitions, of course, are important, and I think not just from the pre-K setting to a work environment or to a higher ed environment, but I think transitions are also equally important between schools. So in elementary schools, say maybe to from feeding in from an elementary school potentially to a receiving middle, or that middle to the high, and just making sure that that is as seamless as it can possibly be, because we need the child to not feel that. You know, we need it to be smooth for the child, and we know some of our students can that can be really overwhelming. That could cause problems, and so we need to work to make sure that that's as seamless as possible. And I see a lot of the questions about monitoring, so that does seem to be a real pattern for sure.
Yeah, we and I know with transition, one of the issues I think is kind of maybe cultural, you know, so having that cultural shift that students with disabilities can go into higher education, which tomorrow morning we'll have a session with higher education representatives talking about some programs within higher education, and also talking about their disability services offices. And so that's in both our technical and community colleges and our 4-year universities. And then also just that vision and that changing the philosophy that people with disabilities can and should be employed, and can and should continue their education beyond high school.
Bambi, if you don't mind, I had some conversations yesterday where concerns were flagged about students who were visually impaired. And then I see a little bit of commentary about that again today. Could you give me your perspective on what exactly the root problem might be on that issue?
So yeah, I see that Ann Jays, who's with Lighthouse, that they're advocating on some guidance. So I think that goes back to that the issue at the beginning is having that expertise within the department, that whenever you have new curriculums or you have any type of change from the State Department, that you have those experts who are there talking about those issues at the beginning, so it's not some like retrofit. And there's just, it's a special area of students, a low incidence disability. And so those students need to, there needs to be experts that can make sure that you have the training of the teachers in the classroom or the professionals working with them, as well as the resources at the department to make the policies that are appropriate for those students.
One of the things that I have previously done as district superintendent that has been seemingly successful has been moving academic components for all students, rather they're a student with a disability, exceptionalities, IEPs in general, moving them all under the Department of Teaching and Learning or all under the Department of Academics, because it should not be, we are planning out academic strategy for some students, but not other students. So having those conversations all built in that one arm of academic strategy, teaching and learning, whatever that department might be called, has really been helpful. But then also having sitting outside of that being that compliance piece to make sure that all those ancillary services are also in place. And that has always been really well, because worked really well, because I don't think we should have a separation of academic departments between these are special education students and these are regular education students. But I think as we think through, every individual child, that should be housed in one location. And that has been productive, because it's forced the special education teacher and the general education teacher, it's forced collaboration between those individuals that otherwise may not have existed.
Right. Thank you. We have a couple more comments within our YouTube, but if anyone is actually in Zoom and they want to be able to speak and they're an attendee, they can raise their hand and we can move you over to panelists and you can actually ask the question yourself. So you can do it that way. One of our questions, Christy Cormier says, there used to be a parent weekend with the Department of Education that trained families of children with special needs entering the school system. That type of engagement helped families understand their rights. And I specifically remember that in 2005, I attribute that Parents Weekend workshop as changing the trajectory of my son's life, because he was going to be going into kindergarten with a in totally self-contained classroom, because I thought that's where kids like him went, and going to that conference, like, no, he has rights to be in the regular education classroom. And so he graduated from high school with the diploma through the April Dunn Act just last month. And so just learning that, teaching me my rights as a parent very early on was just very impactful on our lives.
Yeah, I saw a question about people feeling, special education teachers feeling overwhelmed. And I think that's fairly common. I have my own personal opinion on that. And I think part of the problem is we ask our special education teachers to be everything. We say, take part in evaluation, write the IEP, deliver self-contained content, and then also go push in for inclusion. do all these different things, make contacts, build relationships. And I think more and more we should be looking at our school and saying, which teachers are really good working with evaluation and IEP process, and letting them focus on those things. Which teachers are really good with small group instruction with students, let them focus on those things. Which teachers are really good at push-in instruction and allowing them to do those things, because right now we're asking our special education teachers in so many settings to do everything, and it's causing a burnout, when I think that we could allow them to focus on what they're really good at, what they enjoy doing, and I think we would have more productivity. Also, I saw a question about inclusion. You know, I am very much a fan of inclusion, but also recognizing that it's not the appropriate thing for every single child, but to all extents possible, I think that we should provide every child instruction in front of a strong core content teacher who understands that content, understands how to deliver that content, but has someone in there to support every child, particularly with an IEP, in understanding that content. And so schools may say, well, we do full inclusion, or we're moving towards inclusion. But if you really look at the percentage of time that students are included, it's lower than one might think. And so I think tracking that level of inclusion is really important, and trying to push in to make sure that we get a greater percentage of every child's day in a fully included environment is a really positive thing. Now, I put a disclaimer on that too, that's not 100% appropriate for every child. And that's why those local decisions between parents and advocates and special ed teachers and general ed teachers and school leaders really matter, to make sure we have the appropriate setting for every child.
Thank you. Another question that we received, and I'm not sure if you could answer this, but it is a good question to ask. Where can I find stats on how many students with disabilities graduate from college? Son with physical disability was in early steps and had an IEP through school, now headed to college. Just curious how many kids with serious physical disabilities actually make it to college grad.
That might be a better question for your higher ed conversation tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that, that's it reminds me of the question of people having access to data on the Department of Education website. I know there was some issues in the past several years of just being able to navigate, to be able to find data that people were looking for, or even finding, financial budget information about IDEA funds. And so sometimes it was there, and sometimes the navigation to that information seemed really difficult. So
I would like people to, if possible, weigh in a little bit more, and I can see it in the chat, but the idea of what should we start doing and stop doing, it would be really helpful if I could get a little more information on that from the group, just to pick the brains of the group.
And again, you can type it in YouTube, or if you're in Zoom, you can type it in chat. And if you are if you are an attendee within Zoom, you can raise your hand, and I can move you over to panelists, and you can actually turn on your camera and speak directly. So one of the questions, one of the comments in Zoom is, it's lower because funding for SPED services has been diverted from what is truly meant for, reassessing funding structure of IDEA funds to districts is needed.
Thank you.
And let's see, can attendees raise your hand? Oh, I do have a hand raised. Okay, so you can raise your hand, attendees, and I will, if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll move you over to panelists. So I saw a couple people raise their hand. Alice, I'll move you over. If you have a question, you can ask that question. So Alice, you can now show your video and unmute your mic and ask your question.
Hey, I see Alice.
I couldn't chat. I tried to chat, but I couldn't. It was disabled. But I do work, I'm a case manager for Florida parishes, and I work in Washington Parish. I'm getting a lot of clients who just graduate from school and have never been assessed or referred to DD services. And then when I refer them to, they're 18, 19 years old, then I refer them there, then getting the school records because, you know, they need to be assessed earlier in life. It's kind of a challenge. So it's kind of like there's a break in the chain of them being referred to DD services at the appropriate age. And where would I go to help this situation so that it won't continue?
Yeah. Thank you, Alice. I've made a note of that as a flag.
Thank you.
Alice, I see that often. I think that goes back to the comment that Dr. Brumley said about, you know, special education teachers having to do everything. And so it really, I mean, oftentimes families don't know to go to our human service districts. I find that often that, you know, a child or a young person, it seems pretty obvious that they have a developmental disability, but the family didn't know, you know, may have gotten the information, but didn't follow through with going to the human service districts. And so we have great partnerships with our Families Helping Family Centers. So hopefully, at least if our education systems know, you know, to refer people to our Families Helping Family Centers, then they could, from there, the Families Helping Family Centers could get them into the service system that they need. But that is a real kind of disconnect with a lot of families and students.
Yeah, and I think they've lived with this family member for so many years that they don't even know that service exists.
Right. Yeah, and sometimes it's very troubling when you meet people who have been, you know, they just deal with it and don't even know that the services are available.
Yeah, but they're older adults that are taking care of these younger people. And so when when the adults, you know, oh no, when they're ill because they're older, these clients don't have anyone to take care of them in the future. I have another question. I don't know if this is the right breakout session to ask, but the Nellie Byers Center and the other center up in Washington Parish are closed, obviously, because of COVID. Are there any other programs that they can participate in while these are closed?
Is that a like a day hab program?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so we're gonna have an LDH session a little bit later. It'll be this afternoon.
Okay.
I see a good point there in the chat about working to foster some relationships between the school systems and the local governmental entities too. So that's a point that I've certainly taken down. So good idea.
And everyone, I'm sorry that I just figured out how to enable the chat, and this is our first session, so I think attendees can now chat. I apologize for that. We're going to work through these technical issues. I knew there was a place to be able to do that. We have a comment on YouTube. A higher portion of dollars meant for students with disabilities is sent to charters that serve this population at a lower percentage, leaving districts serving higher cost students with less money given.
Okay.
That has been something that we've been advocating for. The MFP is a very complicated system. So, but it's something that I know they have the answers to. We just have to have the will to try and figure out how to get that funding right. Let's see. Can the attendees now chat? Are y'all still having issues?
I see some commentary too about training for district level leaders or system level leaders who oversee special education, and also quarterly updates for districts. So making a note of those as well. I really appreciate all the feedback. I'm really using this opportunity and others to gather feedback on things that are most important to individuals, and areas that are going well, and places where we really need to make some shifts. So appreciate everyone so much.
So if you have any questions, if you would just raise your hand. Trying to monitor this. Okay, so everyone's saying the chat is enabled. Good. Let me see. Charlie Michel, with who's the director of Bayou Land Families Helping Families, he is a former special ed director, and in Zoom he said, please restart the training for SPED directors and families, which used to take place regularly. There are federal dollars available for this. Thank you, Charlie. And so Superintendent Brumley, the Governor's Advisory Council on Disability Affairs sent you a letter with some recommendations, and I could kind of share what are some of those recommendations.
Yeah, so you'll know we dissected that letter fairly well to really know what you were saying, and look at that, and the issues that you brought to my attention in the letter have been fairly consistent with conversations I've heard with other individuals, and frankly have been fairly consistent with the information posted in the chat session here today. So it all seems to fall in line. So thank you for offering that to us.
Yeah, and I'm actually scrolling through the letter, and it's like, okay, we've touched on all of these points.
Yeah, for sure.
So one thing though that we haven't touched on, I don't think, was to reexamine the procedures for the high cost fund. And for people who don't know, the high cost fund are for districts who have students that really have a high dollar amount, a need that requires a large sum of money, and so districts can request that. So from the department. And so we made some recommendations on that procedure to make it, I guess, more equitable, or maybe an easier process. Okay, and we have a comment here. LGEs could start by providing information at back to school trainings for special education teachers and administrators. And I know that happens, that already happens in some districts, but that should be something that's encouraged more regularly.
I really appreciate this comment about closing the achievement gap for minority students. So you have that subgroup, but you also have an additional subgroup of special education students within the subgroup. And for me, so much is about ensuring that access is given. You know, I think there are just still too many barriers to access, or too many philosophies that prevent access for every child to the highest level of instruction, for every child to the highest level of resource, or for every child to external providers in their to go into their school to support them. So anytime we can knock down a wall or a barrier that prevents access, I think it's going to help with that specific issue.
Okay, we have another question within our YouTube. Will the State Department of Education consider restarting vocational programming in high schools? This could assist with the transition planning for some students. And so they're already vocational programming. I think that the issue is there's inconsistency across the state, because there's definitely that's going on in some districts, but to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the district. And so maybe we could, there could be a way to like address that more equitably across the state and have districts, maybe they need more training or more awareness of how to access those resources. And also the partnerships with their local, like Louisiana Rehabilitation Services offices.
A question about internet connectivity. So that has been that's a real challenge in our state. We don't have universal broadband. I think that universal access to high functioning internet service is critical, not just for K-12, but also for higher ed and for a growing number of adults who are working remotely. The system we pushed to systems rather $316 million, and a great amount of that was used for devices, but also for short-term connectivity needs as well. And as a matter of fact, the governor's funding that he pushed out, which is roughly 30 million of that 300 million, was designated for devices and connectivity. But that amount of money, although it's a tremendous amount of money, will not take care of permanent issues on universal access for everyone. But to that individual's point, and I'm not sure who raised it because it's already down in the chat. If you know of someone who has a specific issue with connectivity, they really should contact their local system, because we have, I know local systems are working to make sure that for individuals who do not have connectivity, that they're trying to figure that out. And we do have some dollars in place to help do that.
We have a couple of other points. So we have a point that was made in regards to MFP process and to work on having 504 students weighted in the MFP process, because it's costly, but it's a huge mandate, but it's not weighted within the MFP. And then another comment that I received was that basically there's a need for more certified special education teachers, and to have a way that recruitment of those teachers is really important. Just special education in general, but also our students, our teachers of low incidence disabilities. I don't think we have a deaf blind education program within our state. We had that several years ago, maybe one of the universities in New Orleans, and that was it's no longer there. And so basically, we don't even have a system in our state to even train to have those teachers. But also just teachers, special education teachers in general, there's a need, as I'm sure you know as a former superintendent.
Well, serving as a superintendent, there are a few areas where you persistently have challenges with staffing. Special education being one, high school science, high school math, and English as a second language. For me, those were 4 areas where we always struggled. So I think we have to think from a policy standpoint, how do we increase the pool of applicants? I'm really excited because I hired, I don't know if some of you may know Kim Eckert. I hired the Louisiana 2018 Teacher of the Year, Kim Eckert. And Kim is really her primary focus is going to be elevating and edifying the role of the teacher, but also working with universities in in a re-energized way to think through ways that we could get more people into that pool who want to be educators. But I think part of it still also goes back to some of our greatest recruiters for future teachers are our current teachers. And if our current teachers feel burned out, or if they're saying, oh my goodness, don't do this work, then that's not good for recruiting. So we have to figure all that out as well. There's just so much to be done, and there's so much we have to do. And I'm thankful for groups like this that are raising issues, flagging issues, and bringing them to my attention here for sure. I've always been really thankful for advocates because they help prevent, or you help prevent things from slipping through cracks. And I've always appreciated that.
I have too. So thanks to everyone who's on this call. We have so many great advocates who've been advocates for a long time. We have a question from YouTube in regards to guidance on the virtual hybrid type situation that's going to happen with schools returning, and what type of guidance will there be for teachers and for school districts in regards to students with disabilities?
We are working right now. This, it has not existed, and so we're working to create virtual instruction expectations, and that will encompass what are some like minimum recommendations for virtual or online instruction. What does an instructional minute look like virtually? How are services? What are expectations for service delivery instructionally? That really doesn't formally exist. And so we are working, unfortunately, having to work very quickly to try and build some of this guidance. So we are doing that, and we have a work group established, and I've asked that team to make sure that they have someone from this space that's represented in that work. And I think part of that work has to be minimum expectations for FAPE through this virtual environment. And this is new for so many of us. And, unfortunately, we have to be, not unfortunately, but unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, and we have to be thoughtful with whatever we do. So it's a real challenge, but we're working through that.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley, and we're at the end of our time. We certainly appreciate you joining us and being our first session. And so hopefully we learned some of the technical issues through this session. But we appreciate your openness and willingness to just listen to us and hear us out. And I know the people I respect in education are really excited about having you as a superintendent. Unfortunately, we're dealing with this pandemic, but I know long-term that you're gonna really put these things in place that our students need. And we really appreciate it and appreciate the collaboration with you.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me room to not come in and say, hey, we're going to do this and we're going to do X, Y, and Z, because I don't think that's the right approach. I've never thought that has been the right approach. What I do think is the right approach is to listen to people, take the letters like the one that you sent me and try to figure out, how we can make that better. Hear from the advocates, look for patterns of challenges, look for patterns of positives, and we have plenty of those too. This is never going to be easy. This is never going to be something we get 100% right, but we can 100% try to get better. And, I'm committed to doing that. I'm excited about doing that, and look forward to working with you all in the future. Stay connected to me, continue to push me, and where there's a hole, bring it to my attention in a professional way, if you don't mind. But, I'll be here. So thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Brumley.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
You too.
So everyone, we finished our first session. I had said at the beginning that we were going to stop our YouTube streaming, but that seems to not be very well thought out and probably not the best way to go about doing it. So right now we're going to just have a little break before we start our next session. We're going to share that, Jamar, if you would share the screen that will, our next session, as you can see on the screen, should be able to see that on YouTube as well. And so I think that's all the instructions that we have now. At 10 o'clock, we will start our next session, and we'll get all those panelists set up. You might hear us talking, getting people set up, but we appreciate you, your patience as we navigate through this technology. Thank you, guys. So I see Dr. Allen is within our Zoom. Let's see, Dr. Michel, don't see Dr. Michel. Ms. Kerth, Mr. Garcia, I see that you're there. Just waiting on Dr. Mills, Ms. Parker, so you're there, and Ms. Boykin. Okay, so we're just waiting on a few of our panelists. And I see we have some questions in our chat. A lot of people saying thank you to Dr. Brumley. He did a great job. Appreciate him. If anyone that's on this panel, this upcoming panel, is in the attendees, would you raise your hand so I can make sure we move you over? Okay, I see someone. Oh, Charlie Michel, I see you. I see Yolanda Jobert and Jessica Candery. You have your hands raised. If you could just chat and let me know in the chat box what you need. Amber, you can go ahead and speak. I see your hand is raised if you have something to say.
Oh, I was just raising it because you said to raise it if you're a panelist. So I'm
No, I'm sorry.
trying to be a direction follower.
It's technology. It's something else. But what I meant was, if there's anyone in that's an attendee that I don't you know, that's a panelist, I can move them over to panelists in case I'm overlooking anyone. But I see that we have, okay, I see Cheramie, Kerth is here. Let's see if Dr. Mills here. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with our next session, which is going to be a discussion about K-12 education during the pandemic. Camera on. And I'll start by introducing our panelists and what I've asked them to do. When I call out their name, they'll turn on their camera and you'll be able to see who I'm speaking of, and then they'll turn their camera off and we'll introduce each person first on the panel. Dr. Kathy Allen. Kathy is a state director of Black Advocates for Life, an organization that promotes respect for and protection for the dignity of every human life in every stage, at every level of ability. She is also the parent of a 13-year-old son with Down syndrome and has advocated for him in education, medical, and civic arenas. She is a member of the National Down Syndrome Congress, Down Syndrome Association of Acadiana, and National Black Pro-Life Coalition. Thank you, Dr. Allen. Next, we have Dr. Charlie Michel. Charlie is a parent of 2 adult children with disabilities, and for the past 2 years has served as the executive director of Bayou Land Families Helping Families. Prior to his retirement in 2018, the position he held during his 34 years in education included general education teacher, special education teacher, middle school and high school assistant principal, and 11 years as special education director. Thank you, Dr. Michel. Next, we have Cheramie Boynes Kerth. Cheramie is a 30-year veteran educator serving as a special education supervisor for St. Bernard Parish school system, a position she has held for 13 years. She currently serves as the president of the Louisiana Association of Special Education Administrators and is a committee member of the Governor's Council on College and Career Readiness, as well as several additional state committees and work groups relating to individuals with special needs and services. Thank you, Cheramie. Let's see, next we have Mr. Robert Garcia. Robert has been an educator for the last 16 years. He has been a regular education and special education teacher, as well as SPED instructional support specialist. Currently, he is the program facilitator for transition at East Baton Rouge Parish School System. Likewise, he serves as the Education Committee co-chair of the Governor's Advisory Council on Disability Affairs. Welcome, Robert. Thank you. And next we have Amber Boykin. Amber is a school psychologist with 13 years of experience in Louisiana schools. She currently serves as the president of the Autism Society of North Louisiana and state delegate for the National Association of School Psychologists. She is also a past president of the Louisiana School Psychological Association. Her professional areas of expertise include trauma-informed practices, autism supports, coaching teachers on supporting students with behavioral needs through positive behavioral interventions and supports, known as PBIS. In addition, her most treasured role is being the mother of 3 boys, including her 13-year-old son with autism. Thanks for being on, Amber. And next, let's see if Dr. Mills, I know she had some issues getting on. Let's see her. Okay, she's on. Are you in the panelists or are you an attendee? Let's see. I think she's maybe connecting. Dr. Mills, are you on? Let's see. Yeah, just give me a moment. I'm looking for my bio for Renee Parker. Oh, here it is. Renee Parker. I'll go ahead while Dr. Mills is getting on. So Renee is from DeSoto Parish. She is the mom of a 16-year-old daughter with Down syndrome. She worked within special education in the classroom for over 8 years. She is currently an advocate for people with disabilities in Northwest Louisiana. So thank you, Renee. Okay, and Dr. Mills. I'll just, let's see, are you able to, trying to see where you're at?
Details because,
Okay, I'll just go ahead and read her biography and hopefully we can get her on. Dr. Tia Mills. Tia is the president of the Louisiana Association of Educators. She was an exceptional student service teacher at Southern University and a Southern University adjunct professor from East Baton Rouge Parish and has been a classroom teacher for 13 years. Dr. Mills is the official spokeswoman for the Louisiana Association of Educators, where her primary duties include leading the association's efforts at the state legislature and the Louisiana Board of Elementary and Secondary Education meetings. And so if all of our panelists would start their video so we can see you guys. Okay, I think I see all of you. Great. We'll start off with a few questions and I'll try and kind of get to all of you and maybe just get different perspectives based on your experience. So I see y'all popping up on YouTube now. So a few questions. Can services to children with disabilities be provided in settings other than the traditional campus? We're talking about now during COVID and as we're moving into the school system, back into the school year, how can those services for students with disabilities be provided? And what are your thoughts or recommendations on that? We'll start with Dr. Michel.
Hi there. One of the things that we need to remember is that services for children with disabilities has always been available off campus. The pandemic gives it a much more global presence because the needs are so different now and some of the concerns are so different. So the short answer to that question is absolutely services can be provided on a setting other than a campus. The key though is to find out in this day and age with the pandemic, why are those services going to be, where those services going to be provided and why? And it needs to be an individualized decision through the IEP team. The only thing that I would suggest is that as a parent, you ask the people in the IEP team, the rest of the team members, why are you recommending this? Are you recommending that the services be provided off campus or on campus? And if so, why? Have a good understanding of what is being offered. The school systems are going to do everything in their power to provide FAPE because they have a legal obligation to do it and a moral imperative to do it. And most school systems will recognize that. So if you understand the reasoning for the recommendation, it will make it easier for you to make a decision and participate in that IEP team meeting. So understand what your child needs, offer your suggestions, but be willing to listen to the school systems because it will look very different if your child is receiving services from home. But that doesn't mean they can't receive an appropriate education, and it doesn't mean that it's not the best thing for them. So again, the short answer is absolutely. It's been done before, so the school systems are no stranger to it. It will just be broadened to encompass many more students than it has in the past.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to get a perspective from a parent who currently has a child in school. So Ms. Parker, would you, what are your thoughts about how should services be provided to students with disabilities?
I know like in DeSoto Parish, as of right now, they've not rolled out a plan for how they're going to provide those services. But as a parent, you need to reach out to your school board and request what you think is right for your child. Because in some circumstances, the school's not going to offer you something because they're kind of stretched thin right now. So you as a parent are going to have to reach out and say, look, my child is supposed to receive these services. How do you plan on making this possible? And I know we have in DeSoto Parish in the past, you've had to take your kid to the school to receive a service. And they're going to provide as safe of an environment as they can right now. And that may be what a lot of schools are doing. If your child was supposed to have, say, OT or PT from 10:15 to 10:45, you may have to take your kid to the school to receive those services if they don't have enough people in place to send them to your house.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to next question. And Dr. Mills, welcome. Glad you were able to get on. I had introduced you prior to getting on, but I have a question for you. What types of professional development opportunities do you think should be provided for special education and general education teachers to better prepare them for the opening of school during this pandemic?
Thank you for that question. As a special education professional myself, being from that background, I think that it's imperative that because we are in very unforeseen times, right? It's critical for us to get as knowledgeable as possible on untraditional ways that we could possibly teach our students during this time. And so I've had candid conversations with several stakeholders around this information. And one of the things that I was told about is the importance of being knowledgeable about the fact that there are compensatory services, the fact that there are a lot of non-traditional ways that we can teach our students using technology. Being from an autism background, for example, if a student wants to get a PE, there's videos that are available online that they can do yoga and different things of that nature, just fun and unique ways that they can do that. And I've also shared some activities with parents that they could put together themselves and utilize at home on a consistent basis. And so there are activities and there are things that we can do and use, but I just want everyone to know that we're in this together. And so we can definitely be a means of support to one another. And I think that the most critical thing is making sure that parents are aware that we can assist them with being able to help and coach them through the educational process for their students. So I think that it's very critical that we have professional development on how to best support them in that way. And I also want to put out there that the Louisiana Association of Educators has a phenomenal teaching and learning center that can assist with a number of different professional development opportunities. So that's pretty much everything I have to say in regards to that. But yes, we need to continue to support one another, and that's an ideal way to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Mills. And I'll also ask that same question to Ms. Cheramie Kerth as a current special ed director or an active special ed director. What type of special education, what kind of professional development opportunities do you think teachers need?
Sure, thank you, Bambi. Here in St. Bernard, we're doing a lot of different professional developments to prepare for the upcoming school year. But I want you guys to rest assured that the general education teachers and special education teachers across this state have been preparing countless hours since March 13, 2020 to prepare for our new way of learning. And so in my district, specifically in the next coming weeks, we're looking at all of our teachers, including SPED teachers, to participate in several types of trainings to assist our students, learning platforms, assessments that we're going to have to administer, and then most importantly, some communication devices and platforms that we're going to be using to keep constant communication with our families. In addition to Zooms, webinars, Google Classroom, whatever platform that systems are choosing, our OTs, our speech therapists, our PTs, APE, everyone is participating in professional developments to prepare our kids for this upcoming school year. In my district, we're also looking at delivering platforms that are virtual. And so what we did was we reached out to Lessard, and Lessard is providing a virtual training for our staff this upcoming week or two. And then they're also going to provide trainings on increasing student engagement and participation in virtual formats. We're looking at coaching our families in virtual formats and then supporting organizations and structures in virtual formats. So Lessard has been a great partner for me in my district. I've shared that information with districts across the state to hope that they will partner with them as well. But that's just one partner that we have. As Dr. Mills said, there's several, agencies that can assist us. And, as a LEA, we're looking forward to always growing. And as teachers, we're always looking for the best professional development out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheramie. And just so people know, Lessard is the Louisiana Autism Spectrum and Related Disabilities Project. through the LSU Human Development Center. And so I appreciate you sharing that information. And the next question that I have is for, I'm gonna ask Ms. Boykin. It has to do with basically like mental health. We know that mental health is gonna be an issue for our students. And so I'm gonna ask you this question. I'm gonna follow up with Dr. Allen to give your thoughts as a parent. Well, I know Ms. Boykin, you're also a parent, so you can give both perspectives. What special considerations would schools consider in supporting student behavior upon reentry into this next school year, given that they had such, the transition back with such an extended closure of school?
Well, I would recommend that our mantra this year is grace. We're going to have to recognize that this isn't a typical return. They've had an extended break, and it may take longer to relearn some of the common routines, much less some of these new routines that we're going to have, such as hand washing and temp checks and different ways to transition and things like that. Also, teachers are going to have to be vigilant that some of our children are going to be showing symptoms of trauma. And some of those symptoms can appear like other disorders, like, for example, hypervigilance can look like inattention. So sometimes we overuse the term ADHD whenever it's really a child that is processing and dealing with some kind of traumatic event, like your loss of your normal routine, school suddenly being shut down, food insecurity, and some of the things that these kids have had to go through during this closure. When we reopen, there's probably going to be more difficulty with emotional regulation. Now, we know that going in because all the trauma research tells us that. So if we're going to be research-based practitioners, we're going to have to view student behavior through that lens, through that trauma lens, and have just a little bit more understanding and a little more grace, and give these kids even longer time to relearn expectations and also to learn how to self-regulate again.
Thank you. And Dr. Allen, your perspective as a parent, what should we do to help our children with disabilities, our students with disabilities transition back to school with such a long time being out of school? What, Kathy, can you unmute your mic?
Hi. One thing I think it's important to remember is that our students are not islands unto themselves. They live in certain families, in certain cultures, in certain communities, and have a certain established way of doing things in their families. So I think it's important that we work as a team with school officials to develop a method of reentry that's going to be child specific, while understanding that our children with special abilities do have certain common traits, commonly shared traits. We want to have a method of reentry that acknowledges that child's strengths and that recognizes the challenges that may exist for that child in the household. For instance, my son has been having an issue with anxiety that started before the end of the school year in the stay-at-home order. So it's been a matter of, with us, for having some continuity of education, and also of a secure environment in which my son can learn. And so for us, making the transition from home, where I've had to essentially be the entire team, to school, where we're going to distribute that responsibility for meeting Joshua's needs, is going to require all of us to work together to understand what is unique about his situation, and to take a whole child approach, which is to know what it is that enables him to respond best, what it is that makes him anxious, what kinds of things are in place to meet his needs. And it's important that parents be a part of the team. I so admire all of you who are in positions of designing the programs and the procedures that we're going to use to get our children back in a learning environment. But I also want us to remember that we've got to be a team in which the parents' input is really critical, because without that knowledge of what's happening at home, then our interventions at school are going to have limited effectiveness. So I look forward to working with our school system. I'm glad that there's so much hard work going on the part of administrators and teachers to design something that's really going to work. My concern as a parent is that it be something that's going to work for my son, given his issues, and that we look at children who may not have access to certain kinds of therapies or technologies and make sure that they are included in what we're doing in the re-entry plan. There are some folks who do have access to computers, do have access to technology, and some of us don't. And so my concern is that parents of children with special abilities who don't have that access and the opportunity to learn about all these things may get left behind. So I think that we're on a really good track. I'm glad that there's so much work going on, but as a parent, I just want to make sure that we all have as much access to information as possible, and that we maintain good lines of open communication with all members of the team.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Next, I have a question. I have not forgotten about you, Mr. Garcia. You knew you were next. You work within transition within the school system. So I'm just wondering how will the transition planning and services be followed with this, what's going on, blended, distance learning or online learning? What are your thoughts and plans in regards to that?
The key here is really collaboration with the teachers, the service providers, and administrators in schools. So the parents need to make sure that they collaborate at this time, maybe virtually, on the transition assessments that are being administered to the student, and then in the planning of or development of the transition goals, and then the planning of the entire transition plan, including the individual graduation plan for students, high school students, and even 8th graders. And then from there, ensure that services are being provided by making a follow-up. So a lot of times we call it, home-based support. If we are doing virtual, whereby, we check with the parent and see if the instruction that has been provided transition-wise has been effective for the student. Another thing that can also be done during this pandemic, especially if we do virtual instruction, distance education, is still provide the student an opportunity with an experience in the community, very close to the community through virtual tour, for example. There are resources out there that are available for free. For example, Edge Factor, they provide virtual videos for students in a particular a company or a particular community resource. And this is, of course, in addition to what the school system has already in place to provide community experiences virtually, the programs that they have. Another thing too is make sure that you still get in contact with the adult agency for transition planning. LRS has been we have been working very closely with LRS here in our district. They really are awesome people, the counselors. So connect with them and make sure that for the students who really are at the age where we can apply for pre-employment transition services or pre-eds, that we apply them for that, so that they can receive job readiness training, career exploration, and the work-based learning, virtually, or whatever the case may be, later on down the line.
Thank you very much. And tomorrow we have a presentation. LRS will be doing, Louisiana Rehabilitation Services will have a presentation tomorrow. So I'm sure they'll touch on pre-eds as part of their presentation as well. So my next question, Dr. Michel, I'm gonna go back to you. because I know with Families Helping Families that you really work on collaboration across systems and with families. So what can we reasonably do during this pandemic to foster meaningful engagement between parents, teachers, paraeducators, and administrators to achieve, to set achievable goals for this school year?
I think the key is going to be patience, because emotions are going to be running high right now because there's so much uncertainty, and that puts parents and educators and administrators in a state of hypervigilance. I heard someone use that term, and it's very true. But during that patience, I don't think we should remove ourselves from the responsibilities that we all have. So I think that if we're open to a true and honest discussion, parents should be willing and able to ask questions of school personnel about what is it that you're going to do with my child? What will it look like for my child? How will it work? What are the outcomes we're looking at? And schools need to be willing to ask the questions of the parents as well. So I think the key is going to be to maintain cool and level heads in a time of total uncertainty toward the common goal of making sure that we're providing the services that that child needs in a manner that's that is sufficient for that child. Now, some of the things that I would caution parents about listening for is if you hear any school personnel say, well, all children with disabilities, fill in the blank, whatever it is, that is not appropriate. No matter what comes after that's part of the sentence, it is not appropriate. If they say no child with disabilities, blah, 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 the same thing is true. So, and I think where we're going to run into that is with some of the mask situations. There are kids that are going to be not able to wear masks because of medical reasons, kids that are not able to wear masks because of sensory issues. And so the key is not to, for the schools not to do a blanket rule for it, but for the parents to be engaged in letting the school system know why the child is not wearing that mask or whatever the situation is, and being willing to listen to some alternatives that the parent can offer and that the school can offer. So I think what we need to do is just trade on the relationship that has hopefully been built in the past, knowing that the trust is still going to be there if it was there before, but knowing that tensions are going to be running high because we all want what's right for the child. Sometimes we have different ideas of how to do it. And we all need to be flexible. Schools need to be flexible in that they're going to have to provide services in a different way. And parents need to be similarly receptive to the fact that the services are going to look a little different. So again, the key is to find out what are the outcomes we want and then determine how we'll get those outcomes. Not start with the process necessarily, start with the outcome in mind.
Thank you, Dr. Michel. And before I go on to the next question, just want to remind people, if you are within Zoom, you can type a question in the chat, or if you're on YouTube, you can type a question there and we'll take those questions from the audience. And now I'm asked this question to Ms. Kerth. They have students with IEPs who are included or have full inclusion, but may require a lot of supports to make that happen. What are your ideas on how that will be offered as we move forward with the different models of education that are being presented by school systems?
Sure. This information is changing every day, as you said. As Dr. Michel, Dr. Allen said, it's going to take some teamwork. Our services will continue to take place in the least restrictive environment with some slight changes that might be determined by the IEP teams based on the safety guidelines that are in place during our present phase. So districts are working really hard to make these decisions and addressing the reopening of schools in a safe manner. But it is going to take the individual needs and their routines, and we're going to have to make a lot of adjustments, as my colleagues have said. Districts have put together Strong Start Returning to School processes, and those processes may change today, may look different tomorrow, maybe next week it'll be totally different, but these are all based on the recommendations of the national, state, and local government and health officials. So these plans of monitoring students and staff include the wellness of the kids, the wellness of the staff. We're looking at if a child were to get sick or a staff member gets sick, what is the procedures and what medical directives do we work with in that situation? And so additionally in my district, I've taken a look at many of our students with special health needs, students with special needs in the sensory area, and just students with learning disabilities, maybe kids who have other disabilities that are unique to them and their families. But in my district, I've purchased additional PPEs. So we have a lot of gloves, we have a lot of masks, we have shields, we have all those tools that we're going to need to help these students remain in their least restrictive environment to the best of their abilities. And so one of the things that we're going to be rolling out in the beginning of the school year are our sensory bags. And these bags will be, I guess, essentially be something like a go bag. And inside these bags, whatever environment the student's in, they will have the tools that they need to, access those environments. So these tools would look something like this. Like maybe we'd have, a little sandbox that they use in class, maybe a squeegee ball or some kind of magic ball that they use. Additionally, we have noise canceling headphones, fidgets, we have TheraBand, just different tools that's going to assist our kids, especially with their emotional stability right now and their transition. So that's one thing that we're looking at. We're also looking at staff schedules and how we can adjust that to provide FAPE. So the delivery may look a little different if we have to go to a static classroom or less movement, maybe it might even just be for the safety and health for the children, then we're going to take a look at still providing FAPE in that environment. So we're going to work really closely as IEP teams and IAP teams and look at our 504 accommodations and, take all of that in consideration with the CDC recommendations. I guess sanitation's a huge push right now. And so we also are providing extra tools and materials into the classrooms, especially those with health needs, extra health needs. So we will be providing extra cleaning in our classrooms to prepare for, that. I know that our teachers and staff are going to need some additional support. So we're looking at, in the beginning of our school year, we're rolling out or instituting a plan that's going to delay the start of school, but not delay it in months or weeks. What we're looking at is maybe a staggered start. So beginning August 11th. For our K-8 students, we're going to bring them in 25% groups. So what that means is we're going to teach the routines, we're going to teach what they need to do, bring them back, help them with their emotional readjustments. And we're going to start that with our elementary, middle, and alternative school. And then in our high school, we're going to start with 50% of our kids coming back to campus on time in a hybrid model. So that's going to look a little different. Now, again, these plans are going to look different across the state based on the needs, based on the staff, based on the students, the families, things like that. So, that what happens in one district may not happen in another. And so right now, I think the biggest thing that we need to worry about are, as our colleagues have said, the emotional needs of the students, the safety and addressing those learning gaps or some of our, unfinished learning that we are going to be assessing, and then keeping that in mind, doing the best we can to provide FAPE in the least restrictive environment, but to ensure that we have happy and safe return to school for our students.
Thank you. Our next question of Dr. Mills, I'm going to ask this of you. What inequities, funding, racial resource availability do you see in school systems that can affect students with IEPs or with disabilities? And what are the possible steps of addressing these issues?
Oh my, so this is a conversation that I've had, excuse me, quite often, especially during the very beginning of school closures, right? So a lot of students, what I've learned is that in rural areas and in cities, there are a lack of internet devices. There's a lack of internet accessibility and technology devices, like laptops, Chromebooks, things of that nature. And so that's something that I've advocated very heavily on as president of LAE, because those were concerns that I received from parents and teachers alike. And so that's ongoing. And so that's the critical part of being able to look at things on the policy side. And I'm grateful that the CARES Act was passed. And so now with the HEROES Act still in motion, and we're trying to get that pushed through. And it seems as if it's going to happen if it hasn't already. We're still monitoring that. We need to ensure that there's enough resources for not just our students with special disabilities, but all students across our state are definitely in need. And so, and there's a inequity issue in regards to things like having electricity and running water, and those things that people take for granted. We don't look at those things as something that a parent or a family may have a lack thereof, or a child, but it's definitely there. And I had to put myself back into the shoes of when I was in the classroom and remind myself of the fact that those were things that I remember my students experiencing. And so I do know that that is still a reality today, and it will continue to be a reality until we can get a handle on the fact that those are basic needs that our families, some of them do not have. And those need to be identified for sure, so we can make sure that those things are provided to those students and those families. Those prospective districts across our state, they receive significant amounts of dollars from the CARES Act initially, and it covers 12 things in particular for our students, and making sure that those needs are met. And technology is definitely one of them. And so we're going to continue to push that they have access to those things, and anything else. I think that I would encourage the districts to definitely conduct a survey or a study of some sort to see what other things that are in need for those students out there, because it's not just the internet, it's not just technology. There are other things as well that, I mean, because they can't utilize the items that are given to them. For example, again, if they do not have electricity to be able to function in the household. And so that's, again, things that we need to have candid conversations about, so we can get to the core of addressing the needs of our students so they can be adequately educated.
Thank you, Dr. Miles. And
Yes.
Ms. Boykin, I have a question for you in regards to the requirement that schools have to conduct social emotional screenings this year, and just what would that look like? How can this data be used, and how can this support students?
So this year, part of the CARES Act funding, Ms. Mills, I think, just mentioned that for schools, school districts have to conduct social emotional screenings. These are actually going to be universal, so it's going to be school-wide. And this is to look for if there needs to be some interventions put in place to assist kids with their social emotional skills. You know, with COVID-19, like I mentioned earlier, you may see some trauma symptoms. You may see an increase in anxiety. You had distance from the relationships that you maintain in the school environment for a prolonged period of time. So these are all concerns that really honestly need to be addressed before academics. I know a lot of educators I work with don't like to hear that because they're so focused on academics, but if we don't address some of these social emotional needs first, you're not going to be able to get to the academic needs. You're not going to be able to get them in a place that they're ready to learn the academics. So they're going to be conducting these screenings probably within the first few weeks of school. And like I said, it is required for them to receive that money. It's one of the requirements. Each district gets to choose their screening, so there may be different tools used in your child's district. I know in my own district we're using a tool called the ByMath 2, just because it has a lengthy history behind it as far as the research, and it will be done digitally. So whether we end up going virtual, if we go back in phase 1, or We have kids that are doing the virtual option even in phase 2. Regardless, we'll be able to deliver that digitally. So I would encourage districts to look at options that you can do digitally, because we really don't know what's going to happen the first few weeks that school opens up, and that way you can still comply with that. So this data does have to remain confidential, like any kind of screening data, but school-based teams should look at this data and determine, okay, if there's a cluster of kids that's showing these anxiety symptoms, then maybe we can put an intervention in place to teach them some coping skills and teach them how to reduce their anxiety, things like that. So they'll look for trends, or they should look for trends in the screening data, and then form intervention groups based off of that and address those social emotional needs. Because we know whenever a kid's social emotional needs are addressed, then they're ready to learn.
Thank you, Amber. This next question is for Dr. Allen. As a parent, what special considerations should schools consider in supporting students' behavior upon re-entry and into this next school year? Unmute yourself, Kathy.
Special considerations, you say?
Yes. So what are the considerations that school consider when supporting school students with disabilities with behavior when they're re-entering school?
Well, first of all, the environment in which the student lives. What is the extent of the support system that student has? What are the resources available in the home and in the family? Because again, the student doesn't live on their own. They're in a family, they're in a community. So what are the things to which they already have access that can be used in tandem with school system resources to help provide for a smooth re-entry? Who's in the home? What kinds of resources are in the home? And again, to go to Dr. Mills' point, we've got some households in which we have people who are considered essential workers. We know that people of color are disproportionately employed in low-wage occupations, disproportionately uninsured or underinsured. And these kinds of insecurities, also there are food insecurities, and we know that these kinds of things create an environment in the home where sometimes it's hard to focus on the emotional needs of your child. So I think we need to not only consider the resources that are available in the school, but also the environment in which a child is living and expected to engage in possibly all virtual or partially virtual learning. It's very important not to use a cookie cutter approach and assume that because a child, as Dr. Michel said, because a child has a disability, that we can just use one certain approach in transitioning into the school system, that we all have a certain level of resources, we have a certain culture, we have a certain way of doing things, and we have certain challenges in the household that I think have to be addressed. Even in my situation here, I've had to ensure, as Amber said, that that Joshua's emotional needs are addressed before we can even work on his academic skills. If he's not had a good night of sleep, if he's feeling anxious about something, it's very hard to work on the reading and the writing and the numbers. He does it with great enthusiasm when he's feeling good about himself and about what's going on. But to the extent that he's not, it's hard to make progress in those areas. So I think that when we talk about returning to one model or another of education, we've got to consider what challenges and strengths exist in the environment in which that student is living to have a successful transition and to develop successful interventions for behavior.
Thank you. And I have a question. This is from our audience. I'm going to ask this of Renee Parker. I know, Renee, you've always been an advocate for students to be in the least restrictive environment. And so if we're requiring students to wear face coverings or maintain physical distance from students and adults, what does that mean for children with special needs? And so if part of the protocol is that if a child cannot be, safely social distance, how the least restrictive environment be met, and along with inclusion if they are in static groups, and what should the makeup of those static groups look like?
I've had this question of my parish, and this has been a question of my own. I have a 16-year-old daughter with Down syndrome, and she is fully included. She does have a para that rotates within and out that classroom, and when she doesn't have a para, she has peer support. So that's going to be very hard to provide these kids with the assistance that they're used to when you're pulling their main resources away from them. So it's hard to determine how they're going to be successful in that kind of setting. And I'm assuming the best practice would be communicate with your parent. Ask the parent if you're comfortable with those practices that have always been in place, still being in place. The face mask issue, I really think that's going to be a catch-22. You have some kids who are not going to have a problem wearing that face mask. You're going to have other kids who do have a problem with it. You have kids who have medical needs who can't wear it because of asthma or whatever. And then you have some kids, somebody commented a minute ago about the bullying situation. You're going to have kids come into a school system that are going to have the fanciest mask ever. And then you're going to have other kids who are going to come in with a plain medical mask. In our district, we have a uniform policy, but they're allowing them to bring their own mask. I really don't know that there is a right or a wrong answer as to how to do that. I really think that the school is just going to have to communicate with the parent, and they're going to have to form a plan to get together. Someone said a minute ago that, you can't just say every kid falls into this category or every kid falls into that category. Not every kid with Down syndrome is alike, just like not every kid with autism is alike. And you're going to have to communicate with that parent to find out what the best practice is for that child. And if you're a parent who doesn't know what that would be, that's the best time to reach out to your advocate and say, hey, look, I don't really know how to go about this situation. Tell me what my best options are. How do I communicate effectively to get the best learning environment for my child? Because in the end, it's not about the teacher. It's not about the parent. It's what's best for that child. And, I think that they said a minute ago, we're just going to have to learn to be flexible and realize that the school's going to try to do what's best. The parent wants what's best. And sometimes they're going to have to meet in the middle to figure it out. And it may not be what it's always looked like. It may not be what you think it should look like, but you've got to do what's best for the child. I hope that answered the question.
Yes, you did. Thank you. That was great. Now, Mr. Garcia, I was just wondering if you could share what are some potential resources that teachers and parents can use with students with disabilities, and particularly specific type of disabilities, students with significant disabilities, autism, that have, hearing issues or visual issues. What are some resources that you would advise for people to use?
I'm gonna start off by saying I'm gonna address the situation where teachers are gonna be doing face-to-face instruction later on, maybe, or blended instruction. The resource is very important that the teacher needs to check out is the guidance, the reopening guidance, and then or they need to establish a district guidance on for students with significant disabilities, because as you know, we do have students who may have a typical behavior, somebody who loves to walk around in the classroom. So what is the plan for that? How are we going to address that when they demonstrate those types of behavior to really ensure that social distancing is observed? One of the things that can also be done is to create lessons or social stories for students with significant disabilities and students with autism, and practice that on a regular basis. And then of course, work with the parent and the paraprofessional in the classroom, to be able to create a plan and create a routine in the classroom during face-to-face or blended instruction. Now for the virtual instruction, there are a lot of resources that are very disability specific. One of them is the resource from Affirm, Autism Focused Intervention Resources. They do have social stories there that you can utilize for your kids with autism. prepare them, prime them for whatever they are going to engage in the coming school year. There are also ASL, American Sign Language stories for students with hearing impairment by the Center of Literacy and Deafness. And of course, we have a Tar Heel reader for the students who have significant disabilities, severe and profound disabilities that, will allow text-to-speech capabilities. All of these resources are out there. And of course, these are additional resources that the parents and teachers can have to supplement instruction. I'd like to believe here in our district, we do have curricula, both academic and transition, that we are going to use, to really meet the students' needs. So, and also we do have Google applications. We have Google Classroom. We do have Google Slides that the teachers, both for inclusion and for students with significant disabilities, can utilize. We can create interactive classrooms for students with significant disabilities so they can have a hub of whatever resources that they're going to go to. And for the students who are in inclusion, we have the Google accessibility features. And I would like to really encourage the parents to really work with the teachers in understanding and knowing the accessibility features, in using the Chromebook or the Google accessibility, so that, the understanding instruction will be facilitated. And I would also like to encourage teachers and even districts to look into flipped classroom model, because I based on research, my research, flipped classroom has been very effective. Especially during this time. The flipped classroom has two parts. We have the virtual classroom, and then we have a follow-up. For our students with disabilities doing virtual, I think it is very important that there is a follow-up of active learning after that, to ensure that they are really grasping what they're learning, maybe independently using a particular program. So I think flipped classroom could also be one thing that we can utilize. And of course, the universal design for learning should be utilized for our students with disabilities, to ensure that our students are understanding what they're being given. When we say universal design for learning, these are options that the student can have in addition to the text provided to be able to access the content. Maybe videos, maybe graphic organizers, and for demonstration of learning, different ways to demonstrate learning, not just paper and pencil or like written exam. You can utilize also verbal responses and things of that nature. So these are the different resources that the teachers can use. And I would send Ms. Polizzola, I would send you a list of things that I have, that I know, and I'll provide the link to it for the ones who are interested to check it out.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Ms. Kerth. What are some of the biggest challenges that special education leaders such as yourself are facing as you prepare for the reopening of schools?
There's a lot of challenges out there, but as I speak to all of our state special education directors and supervisors, they're just wanting to provide the best support to transition our kids back. And so whether that's in a staggered start, providing the professional development to the teachers or to the families, just the emotional support of it, that's been a challenge. But rest assured that this pandemic has caused a lot of confusion, but the teachers and the state leaders and the district leaders are pre-planning, they're replanning, they're communicating with our stakeholders, and they're implementing strategies and procedures to make a smooth opening, as smooth as possible. So, as I meet and speak with districts daily, one thing that I'm consistently hearing is that there's a passion to provide a safe environment and a welcoming environment for all of our students, no matter what the platform is. So even though we're confused day to day sometimes about what platform's best for our students, I know that the Department of Education has provided lots of resources and toolboxes for our families and our teachers, our stakeholders, et cetera. And so you can find those all on the department's website. There's also links to accessibility, the academic support, direct, related, but there's also what I would suggest our families look at is the family toolbox too, so that they can have some support at home. So yes, we have challenges of opening schools, making sure that they're safe, but I just want all the families out there to know that the districts are working very hard to provide a comfort level for you guys, and the students is our number one priority, as Renee has said over and over, that providing FAPE is very important in a least restricted environment, but the safety of our kids is number one. So thanks.
Thank you. So I'm gonna ask one more question, and that's second. As we look at like IEPs, you know, the individual education plans that students with disabilities have for that guides their education. How do you see that moving forward? That process of having will IEPs need to change? How will school districts be able to work through that with such a, seems like it'd be a challenge right now with everything that's going on, and probably needing IEPs needing changes due to the circumstances. So I'm gonna go to Ms. Boykin. I know you do a lot with IEPs as a school psychologist, so just wanted to see what your thoughts were about that. You can unmute yourself.
I always remember to unmute. So when working with IEPs, I think that I've seen some guidance come out from other states where there's rubrics and, you know, if there is this, do this. And I really, to be honest, I don't like that. I think that we need to remember the I in IEPs, especially this fall. It stands for individualized, and that things are really going to have to be decided on a case-by-case basis. I do know I do want to mention one thing about parents. If you're a parent of a child that was in the process of getting an initial evaluation and you're waiting to see about the IEP or get that child's IEP, and that evaluation might have started in the spring, I wanted to touch on some of the timeline changes that occurred because of COVID. Myself, I have evaluations that are outstanding from the spring that I'll have to finish. For initial evaluations, Bessie has some authority there, and so they did grant a waiver to extend the timelines from 60 days to 90 days, and these are business days. This is school days. So whenever we go back into school, we will have a very short amount of time, but some time to get those initials cleared up from the spring or get them finished up. And then the IEP should follow within 30 days of the close of the evaluation. The reevaluations and the Part C to Part B transition evaluations, those were not waived. Those are federally controlled. So all of those should be occurring on schedule. If it's a reevaluation IEP, it should be occurring on schedule. A lot of districts chose to do those through Zoom to keep things current. I hope all districts chose to do that through Zoom to keep it current. And that's also another consideration this fall that, for example, we've been talking about in my district. Even though we're reopening, we may still offer the possibility to do things through Zoom just to limit contact. We definitely want parent engagement, but if they can be engaged from a Zoom platform instead of having to bring them in, and that's bringing in one extra person into the school for exposure, then you know, that's a great way to prevent further exposure. But those timelines have not changed. IDEA has not been waived as far as IEPs and things like that. So it should still be individualized. Each case should be assessed on a case-by-case basis on how best those services can be provided based on that child's individual goals. So I guess my main thing is I would caution using a cookie cutter approach to how we look at IEPs or solve problems.
Thank you, Amber. And next, we'll go ahead and, since this session ends at 11:15, what I want to do is give everyone about 2 minutes just to give your closing thoughts, recommendation, and your encouragement in regards to resuming school and education for our students with disabilities. And I'll just look at my screen and I'll call on you based on who's on my screen. So Mr. Garcia, you're up first. I give you up to 2 minutes just to give your closing thoughts.
Okay, so my thoughts are more than ever, we need to really work together as a team, parents and teachers, to be able to provide appropriate services and instruction to these students during this time. I would like to say that the teachers, service providers need to do needs assessment with the parents to be able to know what are their needs technology wise, platforms and programs that they need to know, use of assistive technology, and the communication boards and things of that nature. We need to be very flexible, although we cannot jeopardize what's in the IEP and what really is appropriate for the student. But as a team, we can work together to make adjustments as needed, but still follow what's in the IEP and provide the free appropriate public education. Teachers need to be very keen with providing accommodations and strategies such as universal design for learning to be able to reach the students with disabilities. Teachers of significant disabilities need to provide those resources and activities that are interactive and engaging to be able to reach to those students who are doing distance education. And I think we just need to make sure that everything is on the same, everybody is on the same page to be able to implement whatever services that need to be implemented smoothly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next we'll have Dr. Kathy Allen.
Oh, first of all, it's been an honor to be on the panel with all of you experts. It's been an educational experience for me. I just want us to remember that parents need to feel that they are a part of the team with educators and the paraprofessionals and the administrators. We want to give our input, and I'd like us to also be mindful that the environment in which we live and work and play and attempt to educate our children has an impact on whatever it is that's being planned at the school level. So I'd like to encourage us, those of us who are developing plans for re-entry into school, to remember that each child has a certain environment that will be affecting their ability to re-enter and to thrive, and that we address the needs of parents as well as students in developing a plan that's going to be workable for everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Next we'll have Ms. Renee Parker.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. I guess I'd just like to say first to the parents out there, remember that no one knows your child better than you do. And it's your responsibility as a parent to stand up and voice what your child's needs are. Having said that, I also been on the educator side, and I truly believe that 9 times out of 10, every SPED teacher or every teacher that your child comes in contact with truly has your child's best interest at heart. So during this pandemic, no one really knows a right or wrong answer. There's no, just like they said, there's no cookie cutter way for every child. You as a parent need to reach out to your school, need to reach out to your SPED director, have a conversation with them, let them know what your needs and concerns are for your child. They're going to let you know what their needs and concerns are, and you make the best decision for your child. My daughter Lacey is going to have to go virtual because she has a really compromised immune system. School is her favorite place to be. So this is very hard on her and I both, because I know how much she loves it. But as a parent, you have to do what's best for your child. So reach out to your school. And if you're not one of those people that feel like you can do that, find an advocate. There are tons of advocates out there who would love to help you and who can guide you in the right direction. But just remember that you and the teachers are in this together, and whatever you do what's best for your child, not what's best for you. It's about your child.
Thank you.
Thank you for
the next person I see on my screen is Ms. Amber Boykin.
So thank you for letting me serve here today. earlier I said my word for the year is going to be grace, or our word for the year should be grace. I'm going to give you another word for the year, and it's going to be communication. I think that that's really going to be key this fall, because I know as a parent, I don't know all the details of my child's school's own plan, and that gives me anxiety not knowing what's going to happen, right? We feel better whenever we know what to expect. So the parents, like Renee said, the parents need to be reaching out and communicating and saying, hey, these are our plans, these are our needs, how is this going to look? Ask those questions. But the school districts also need to try some creative ways to start communicating with the parents and letting them know what to expect beforehand as well. This is not a show up day one of school and figure everything out kind of situation. Something I thought that was really helpful that my own district did last week was they had a Facebook Live town hall meeting and allowed people to pose questions in chat, and they had different administrators there answer the questions. And if they didn't know, they said they didn't know, but they're holding a follow-up one, and they'll try to get some of the answers to those questions. So I think as many different creative ways that you can find to go ahead and start communicating with families and with the children before school starts, the better prepared they're going to be. Another thing that they could do is, you know, we're talking about social stories, Mr. Garcia mentioned earlier. You can create little video vignettes and put on the school social media and send out about some of these new routines to do some video modeling of what that's going to look like. Use the school staff that the kids are familiar with. You know, their teachers and their administrators in the videos, in the setting, in the school where they're going to be. Just really think outside the box and how you can really address the communication needs, the two-way communication needs for this fall, so that everybody's on the same page, the right questions are being asked, and questions are getting answered.
Thank you, Amber. Next, we have Dr. Michel.
Hi, I too want to thank you for letting me be on this, because having retired from the school systems a couple of years ago, I'm always afraid I'm going to become obsolete, and hopefully that hasn't happened yet. But I want to start off with a little dose of reality. It's not optimism, it's not pessimism, it's just reality. Whatever your circumstances were before this pandemic, if there were problems with your school systems or pluses with them, the reality of it is the pandemic has not wiped away any problems that you had before. It has only added to them. That's a dose of reality, just so we keep that in mind. But here's where the optimism, I think, comes in. Over the past 12 years, I've been able to work with Cheramie, Kerth, and with about 68 other special ed directors across the state of Louisiana. And one thing all of them and we had in common during my tenure there, we're all advocates for children. We know that there will be times when the outcomes are not going to be the same, and what a parent wants or thinks is right, or what the school system wants, thinks is right, or can provide and legally must provide. But the advocacy is there on all ends. So like Renee said and Amber said, if we keep in mind that this is about the child, we can overcome those kinds of things. So my thing is, look at the hope that's coming through all of this. We've got to build bridges. We've built some bridges, and if we have a good solid bridge, then we need to get together to build a stronger bridge, because the bridge can never be too strong, because the needs will only get greater as your child gets older. And I have a lot of hope in spite of the pandemic and all of the things that are going on and the uncertainty, because in a couple of meetings that I've had with Dr. Brumley over the past week, I think that he is hearing some of the concerns that parents have expressed, that school systems have expressed. And I believe that over time, and he needs time, that there will be positive changes that are coming, which is gonna filter down to every child in Louisiana, whether they have a disability or not. So keep that in mind. Let's look at the positive. Let's realize what the negative may be, but let's look at the positive. The pandemic is here. It may be here for quite some time, but the efforts and the desires of all the adults in your child's life have never been more specific and more verbalized than they are right now. And I think we need to embrace the fact that the importance of the IEP team, the team, has never been greater than it is now. So use that opportunity to make life better for your children, and not only your children, but for children in years to come. So again, thank y'all for letting me be part of this.
Thank you, Dr. Michel. Next, we have Ms. Kerth.
Um, our district this year has adopted the motto and the word hope. So we're expressing the power of hope as we go through this process together as a team. And on behalf of the school districts across the state of Louisiana, families have really stepped up in this new way of learning. And we want to first thank those families for assisting us as educators. And additionally, those advocacy support centers throughout the state have provided so many opportunities for our students and families through like Zoom, webinars, phone calls, resources, any references that they need in this precedent time. They've reached out to these families. So thank you to those advocacy support centers. School systems will continue to be important partners with families and agencies as we navigate these uncharted learning waters and learning platforms. So districts have to provide families with options to access learning opportunities on these various platforms, depending on our families' needs and what platform they choose, which will definitely vary. We're going to use, as Amber mentioned, different ways to get that information out through Zoom, webinars, social media, print material, Q&As, whatever we can do to assist with families. So as you're out there listening, please reach out to your local school systems for accurate information regarding your children. And lastly, again, like the rest of the panel members, this has been an incredible opportunity to speak to you guys as a panel member, but also the opportunity of learning from the others on a panel has been inspiring to me. Each and every one of you has taught me something today that I'm looking to implement in our district as well as statewide. And Governor John Bell Edwards has been a great partner with us, with our students with disabilities and families with challenging needs, and as well as our new superintendent, Dr. Brumley. We want to thank you on behalf of our school systems across the state, whether we're a local LEA or a charter system. We thank you for your support in this area. And lastly, the Department of Ed staff that has helped us to put together resources and continue to work with us. But mainly, let's reach down to those state and local leaders who are putting in the hard work, who are on the ground, boots to the ground, working very hard every single day. And that goes all the way down to our students. So I'd like to first and lastly, thank our students for everything you're doing to help us. You are our main priority and you will continue to be. And so thank you, and continue to advocate for yourself as you navigate this new school year. And best of luck to all of you guys.
Thank you, Cheramie. Dr. Mills, you are last, but certainly not least. We'd like to get your thoughts and the perspective. Of course, the teachers are so vital. And I know that you represent thousands of teachers across the state. So if you would just close the session.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's truly an honor to have had this opportunity to share and bounce ideas and thoughts off of one another. It's something that was invigorating for me, and it definitely was a learning experience for me also. What I want each and every one of us to keep in mind is that we're working together. We are in uncertain times. So this situation is definitely not perfect. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And we are learning and growing through this situation as we go. Don't be afraid to discuss the items you aren't comfortable with and that may not work, because just as we educate our children individually, it's trial and error. And so if something doesn't work, what do? We try something else until we get it right. The most important thing is to know that our children are precious and we value them greatly. We hate that there isn't ideal connection face to face on a consistent basis at this time. However, know that the districts across the state are doing everything in their power to ensure a rewarding learning opportunity for our children and a comfortable experience for everyone. What we've learned is that this is an opportunity to enhance a situation that we pray will never have to be used again, right? So when we look back at this in history, it is my hope that we can have this as a blueprint for something that may come in the future, which again, I hope doesn't happen again in the future, but it provided us with an opportunity to enhance on something that we never encountered before. And I'm hopeful that this is really showing the true education professionals that we are, because we are resilient, We are excellent, and we always know how to rise above a situation. And that's what I love about this profession so much, because we have the heart to and the mindset and the determination to educate our children regardless of the situation, regardless of what platform that is being utilized to do so. So I think that's I will end with that.
Thank you, Dr. Mills, and thank all of you, all the panelists. You were absolutely great, star-studded panelists. We appreciate you guys. So let's go. This will end our session for K-12 education. And what we'll do, for our people who are listening on YouTube, we'll go ahead and we'll stop this YouTube because our next session will not be until noon. And we'll stop it and just restart and have one YouTube streaming for the entire afternoon, the 4 sessions during the afternoon. We'll keep our Zoom on, so those of you on Zoom can stay on Zoom, and Jamora will put up some information on our screen and screen sharing. I think I've covered everything. Well, I just want to go over our afternoon schedule. At 12 o'clock, Lillian Dejean will be speaking on disability history and culture. If you know Lillian, if you've heard her speak, I know you will be on at noon to hear her speak. And if you haven't heard her, you definitely want to jump back on and listen to Lillian, who is a youth self-advocate. Next, at 1 o'clock, we'll have the Department of Health talking about their services for people with disabilities during a pandemic. And then we'll also have at 2 o'clock, emergency preparedness for families with disabilities. And then the last session for the day will be at 3 o'clock, and it'll be in regards to accessibility law. So we'll go ahead and end it here. Jump back on our YouTube channel for a new streaming video, and we'll see you all at noon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.